Mercedes may have just triggered the biggest Formula One controversy of the season. George Russell was leading the Canadian Grand Prix. Kimi Antonelli was right behind him. The two Mercedes drivers were fighting harder than anyone else on the grid, and the car looked almost untouchable all weekend. Then suddenly, everything exploded. Russell's car suffered a complete electrical shutdown in the middle of the race. The FIA immediately started looking deeper into the situation. And now people across the paddock are asking a terrifying question. Did Mercedes cross the line chasing performance under the new regulations? Because the suspected issue centers around the microscope system, one of the most powerful and most sensitive electrical components in Formula One's entire 2026 rule package. And if Mercedes really found extra performance in an area nobody else fully understood yet, this could become far bigger than one retirement. This could become a full championship scandal. Antonelli inherited another victory. Russell walked away devastated. Toto Wolff suddenly looked tense despite winning the race. And now the FIA investigation is hanging over Mercedes at the exact moment the team finally became the fastest car on the grid. That changes everything. Because once Formula One starts whispering the word cheating, trust disappears instantly. Every overtake becomes suspicious. Every dominant qualifying lap gets questioned. Every future Mercedes victory will now be examined under a microscope. And the deeper you look into what happened in Canada, the more uncomfortable the situation becomes. Russell admitted he heard strange noises before the car completely shut down. The electrical systems were reportedly operating under enormous stress. And internally, Mercedes already looked emotionally unstable because of the growing war between Russell and Antonelli. Now combine all of that with FIA scrutiny. This is no longer just a race weekend problem. This is the exact kind of situation that can destroy championships from the inside. Because if the FIA confirms Mercedes pushed beyond acceptable limits, Formula One could suddenly be facing its biggest technical controversy in years. And the terrifying part for Mercedes? This may only be the beginning. At first, nobody inside Formula One thought Canada would become controversial. Mercedes simply looked faster than everyone else. George Russell controlled qualifying. Antonelli matched his pace during the race. And the two silver cars immediately pulled away from the rest of the field like they were operating in a completely different category. That alone already made rivals uncomfortable. Because Formula One teams understand something fans sometimes forget. When one team suddenly gains a huge performance advantage under new regulations, everybody starts asking questions. Especially when the gains appear connected to electrical systems nobody fully understands yet. And that is exactly why the atmosphere around Mercedes changed so quickly after Russell's retirement. The moment the car shut down completely, engineers across the paddock became interested instantly. Not because retirements are unusual. Because the way the failure happened looked extreme. Russell described losing everything at once. No electronics. No regenerative braking. No power systems. Complete shutdown while leading the race. That type of collapse immediately points attention toward the most sensitive area of the new regulations. The microscope. Now, this is where things become very important. The microscope is not just another engine component. Under the 2026 regulations, it has become one of the central performance weapons in Formula One. It handles huge amounts of electrical energy deployment during acceleration and overtaking. And compared to previous years, the system now operates under dramatically increased electrical demand. In simple terms, teams are pushing more electrical power through these systems than ever before. And whenever Formula One enters a new technical era, teams immediately start searching for gray areas. Tiny advantages. Creative interpretations. Ways to extract more performance than rivals without technically breaking the rules. That is how Formula One has always worked. But sometimes, the line between innovation and illegality becomes dangerously thin. And Canada suddenly pushed Mercedes directly into that conversation. Because rival teams reportedly started questioning how Mercedes unlocked so much pace so quickly after introducing major upgrades in Montreal. The car looked transformed. Stronger launches. Better balance. More aggressive acceleration out of slow corners. Even the front-end stability through the chicanes looked dramatically improved. That level of progress immediately attracts attention in Formula One. Especially when combined with electrical systems already operating near their maximum theoretical limits. And then came the FIA involvement. Now, it is important to stay accurate here. The FIA has not publicly declared Mercedes guilty of cheating. That has not happened. But the governing body reportedly began taking a deeper look into the technical circumstances surrounding the failure and system behavior during the weekend. And in Formula One, even deeper scrutiny alone can create massive tension inside the paddock. Because teams know what usually happens next. More data reviews, closer monitoring, technical clarifications, possibly even formal directives later if concerns continue growing. That is why Toto Wolff suddenly sounded so cautious after the race despite winning again. Mercedes understands the danger perfectly. Once suspicions begin spreading publicly, every future performance gain becomes controversial automatically. Every dominant lap gets questioned. Every upgrade becomes suspicious. And rivals start pushing the FIA harder behind closed doors. But here is the most explosive part of the entire situation. The growing tension between Russell and Antonelli may actually be making everything worse. Because both drivers are pushing each other unbelievably hard right now. In Canada alone, they exchanged the lead multiple times during the opening phase of the race while fighting almost on the limit of acceptable aggression. That kind of internal war creates enormous stress on the machinery. More aggressive energy deployment. Harder acceleration zones. Constant pressure on electrical systems already operating near maximum capacity. And suddenly, Mercedes faces a terrifying possibility. What if the car became vulnerable precisely because both drivers are forcing it beyond what engineers originally expected? That would explain why the car looked unstoppable right before collapsing completely. And psychologically, the situation inside Mercedes is becoming extremely dangerous now. Antonelli inherited another victory. 5 consecutive wins. Massive championship lead. Meanwhile, Russell walked away emotionally devastated after losing what may have been his best chance all season to stop Antonelli's momentum. That imbalance matters enormously. Because once one driver starts feeling the team is naturally moving toward the other side of the garage emotionally, trust begins disappearing very quickly. And Formula One teams cannot survive long-term without trust internally. Especially not while the FIA is watching more closely every single weekend. That is why Canada suddenly feels so much bigger than one DNF. Mercedes may have exposed 3 separate problems at the exact same time. A fragile electrical system. An emotional civil war between drivers. And growing FIA scrutiny surrounding the fastest car in Formula One. That combination can destroy championship teams faster than raw lack of pace ever could. Inside the Formula One paddock, suspicion spreads faster than almost anything else. And after Canada, suspicion around Mercedes started growing everywhere. Not publicly at first. Quietly. Inside engineering meetings. Private conversations between rival teams. People watching telemetry patterns. Comparing acceleration traces. Looking at how aggressively the Mercedes deployed power exiting corners compared to everyone else. Because what made Canada so uncomfortable for rival teams was not just that Mercedes won. It was how dominant the car suddenly looked after introducing the upgrades. The W17 did not behave like a car making small improvements. It looked transformed. And in Formula One, sudden transformations always attract attention. Especially during the first years of a brand new regulation cycle. Remember, teams are still learning the true limits of these 2026 systems. Nobody fully understands yet where the performance ceiling actually exists. That means if one team suddenly appears significantly ahead electrically, rivals immediately start wondering whether they discovered something nobody else found yet, or something nobody else was willing to attempt. That is where the tension around Mercedes becomes dangerous. Because even if the team did nothing illegal, perception alone can destabilize a championship. And now every single thing Mercedes does is being analyzed differently. The launches. The battery deployment. The top speed. Even how aggressively Russell and Antonelli attacked each other during the race. All of it suddenly feels suspicious to rival teams watching from behind. That pressure becomes even more explosive because the FIA is now reportedly monitoring the situation more carefully after the Canada failure. And when Formula One teams know the governing body is paying closer attention, paranoia inside the paddock increases immediately. Teams begin protecting information more aggressively. Engineers stop trusting rivals. Political pressure behind closed doors intensifies. That is how Formula One controversies usually begin. Not with one dramatic announcement. With growing tension that slowly poisons the atmosphere around the championship. And right now, Mercedes is standing directly in the center of that storm. But here is the deeper issue almost nobody is discussing publicly yet. What if Mercedes themselves are no longer fully comfortable with how aggressively they are pushing the car? Because Canada exposed something extremely important psychologically. The team may actually be trapped by its own success. Think about it. Mercedes finally found massive performance. The upgrades clearly worked. Russell looked capable of winning comfortably. Antonelli continued dominating the championship. The car became the benchmark of the grid almost instantly. Now imagine being an engineer inside Mercedes after Canada. You know the car is unbelievably fast. But you also just watched the race leader suffer a catastrophic electrical shutdown while pushing at maximum intensity. That creates a terrifying internal conflict. Do you protect reliability and risk losing your advantage? Or do you continue pushing the package aggressively because you know rivals are getting closer every weekend? That is the exact kind of pressure that destroys Formula One teams emotionally. Especially teams already dealing with internal driver tension. Because Russell and Antonelli are no longer behaving like teammates managing a title calmly. They are behaving like rivals trying to establish dominance inside Mercedes itself. Every battle between them now carries emotional weight. Every qualifying session feels personal. Every overtake becomes symbolic. And under those conditions, drivers naturally push machinery harder than teams originally planned for. More aggressive exits. More energy deployment. More stress on systems already operating dangerously close to the limit. That may be the hidden truth Canada exposed. Mercedes may not have a cheating problem. Mercedes may have a control problem. The car became so fast, the drivers became so aggressive, and the pressure became so intense, that the entire project started operating outside its emotional comfort zone. And Formula One teams are incredibly vulnerable when that happens. Because once pressure starts overwhelming internal stability, small problems stop staying small. A reliability issue becomes a political issue. An FIA review becomes a paddock scandal. A teammate rivalry becomes a civil war. And suddenly, the fastest car in Formula One starts looking fragile in every possible way. That is exactly where Mercedes stands now. The FIA is watching. Rivals are questioning. Russell looks emotionally exhausted. Antonelli keeps winning. And Toto Wolff suddenly finds himself trying to manage the most dangerous thing any Formula One team can face. Not lack of speed. Too much pressure all at once. And this is the moment where Formula One usually becomes ruthless. Because once the paddock starts doubting a dominant team, every future race becomes political. Not just competitive. Political. That is exactly what Mercedes now risks facing after Canada. Imagine the atmosphere heading into the next Grand Prix. Every rival engineer is studying Mercedes data more aggressively than before. Every FIA technical delegate is paying closer attention to the car. Every unusual performance gain immediately triggers questions. And inside Mercedes itself, the emotional pressure keeps growing with every passing day. That combination is incredibly dangerous. Because Formula One teams perform best when confidence feels calm and controlled. Mercedes no longer looks calm. The body language after Canada revealed everything. Toto Wolff looked tense. Russell looked emotionally drained. Even the celebrations around Antonelli's victory felt strangely restrained compared to previous race weekends. That detail matters more than people realize. Normally, 5 consecutive victories would create pure euphoria inside a garage. But Canada did not feel like celebration. It felt like relief mixed with fear. Because deep down, Mercedes may already understand the truth. The team is now balancing on an extremely dangerous edge. One more major failure could trigger complete chaos internally. And Formula One teams almost never recover smoothly once chaos begins spreading through the garage. Because pressure changes people. Engineers start second-guessing decisions. Drivers become more emotional on the radio. Strategy departments grow more conservative. Trust slowly weakens everywhere. And the terrifying part is that all of this is happening while Mercedes may still have the fastest car by a clear margin. That creates temptation. Huge temptation. The team knows the W17 can dominate races when everything works correctly. Canada proved that before the shutdown happened. Russell and Antonelli looked untouchable compared to the rest of the field during the opening stages. So naturally, Mercedes will want to keep pushing aggressively. More performance. More electrical deployment. More qualifying pace. But now every extra step forward carries another question. How close are they really operating to the limit? That uncertainty becomes even more dangerous because the drivers themselves are escalating the situation emotionally every weekend. Antonelli now drives with the confidence of a future world champion. Russell drives with the frustration of someone watching the championship slip away despite performing at an elite level. That emotional contrast creates instability naturally. And unstable environments create mistakes. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. That is what Formula One history always shows. Dominant teams rarely collapse because rivals suddenly become faster overnight. They collapse because internal pressure slowly destroys decision-making from within. And Canada suddenly made Mercedes look vulnerable to exactly that kind of collapse. Especially if FIA scrutiny keeps increasing. Because once technical suspicion enters Formula One publicly, the entire atmosphere changes around a team. Every future victory feels controversial. Every upgrade becomes questioned. Every onboard clip gets analyzed frame by frame online. Drivers start hearing whispers inside the paddock. And psychologically, that pressure becomes exhausting very quickly. Now combine all of that with the growing tension between Russell and Antonelli. This is no longer just a normal teammate battle. This feels personal now. Russell knows he was fast enough to win Canada. Antonelli knows the championship momentum is fully on his side. And Mercedes suddenly finds itself trying to manage two drivers emotionally moving in completely opposite directions. One gaining confidence every weekend. The other losing trust after one devastating mechanical failure. That is almost impossible to control long term. Especially while engineers are simultaneously trying to guarantee reliability under extreme electrical stress conditions. And this may be the most important part of the entire story. Canada did not expose one single Mercedes weakness. It exposed multiple weaknesses colliding at the same time. Reliability concerns. Emotional instability. Growing FIA attention. Internal driver tension. Championship pressure. And once all those elements start interacting together, Formula One situations can spiral unbelievably fast. That is why rivals across the paddock suddenly look interested again. Because for the first time all season, Mercedes no longer looks invincible. They look vulnerable. Not vulnerable because the car lacks speed. Vulnerable because everything surrounding the speed suddenly feels unstable. And in Formula One, unstable dominance rarely survives for very long.